Well, hello, With Gratitude Matt listeners. My name is Matt Moran. I'm the host for the With Gratitude Matt Show. On the show, our goal is to inspire our listening audience to practice gratitude regardless of how powerful their storm is. We've learned that the practice of gratitude works much like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. I'm so delighted to have today's guest on. John Hurd is going to inspire you for how he picked up track and specifically sprinting at the age of 61. Prior to him picking up track, he had a very successful technology career. He grew up in the Memphis area, graduated from Memphis State, and it wasn't until age 61 that he picked up track and field. And today has competed in track events all over the world. In fact, has earned over 160 medals, including ones from the Senior Olympic. Today, he is married to his wife, Sandy, and has 3 grown sons. John, it's such an honor to have you on today's show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you inviting me.
Absolutely. John, it was such an honor, and we connected a few weeks ago. Just hearing your story inspired me so much because you did at 61 what so few people can do at 15, 20, and so on and so forth. But before we get into, when you picked up track and field and committed to sprinting, I'd love to hear a little bit about your childhood and what it was like growing up in Memphis.
Well, I moved to Memphis when I was 13 in junior high school, and with the typical routine, I did not participate in team sports in school except boxing, because they had a weight division that I could fit into. It was 92 pounds to 100. In the 10th grade, I was 5 feet nothing inch tall, so that's the only sport that had a place for me. But I envied the guys on the track team because I enjoyed thinking that I'd like to be with them, but that just wasn't cut out for me at that time.
Right, and then you went on. You went on to Memphis State. You had a very successful career in business. Maybe just share a little bit about some of the highlights there before we get into your track career.
Well, I graduated in 1956. I had one interview. That was with the IBM Corporation, upstate New York. They flew me up. They had an interview there in Memphis, and they flew me to New York for a second interview, and I spent several years with them as a programmer, system designer, systems engineering manager, instructor, instruction manager, and had my claim to fame during that period, I guess you might say. I had a call from Ross Perot's office and wanted me to come down and work for him, and I said, no thanks, I'm going to stay with IBM. I didn't know who Ross Perot was. A year or two later, I learned how much I had already lost by not taking advantage of that offer. But
so with spending your early career, how long were you with IBM?
About 14 years, from 56 to 1970.
My guess is you had plenty of blue suits with striped ties.
Oh, yes.
So how does a guy who, you did box as a young kid, which is amazing, but how does a guy at age 61 who really didn't train, didn't compete outside of boxing at a young age, find sprinting as a sport, as a passion?
It wasn't something I was actively looking for. I just came across an article in the local Memphis paper about a friend I'd had in college, not a close friend, but we knew each other well, and he was a track sprinter star. National records, world records, and so on. And turns out that he's running for an outfit referred to as the Senior Olympics, beginning at that time 55, now it's 50. they had age brackets from 50 to 54, 55 to 59, and so on. And at that time, I thought, boy, they're still doing this. Maybe I could get in that and do what I wanted to do 40 years ago, 45 years ago, and couldn't. So I thought, well, Jim's 3 years younger than I am, so I'll only have to meet him 2 times out of 5 years. And the rest of the time, I might find some guys that I've outlived this part. So anyway, I called the state office of this thing, and I said, what kind of speeds, what kind of times do the guys in my age record in the 100 and 200 meter dashes? And he gave me some numbers that didn't mean anything to me, but it was something to think toward.
Yep.
So I started setting goals, and I learned along the way that if you really want to accomplish something in life worthwhile, you got to set goals, and furthermore, you got to track them and stay with them. So I did that. What I had learned in my computer career was how to use Microsoft Excel. In fact, I taught it for a couple of decades. And so I set spreadsheets out with, this is what I'm doing today, and this is what I want to do by the time those games get here. And I would track it every week. Every time I went to the track, I knew what that spreadsheet said I got to be doing that week. And I kept going, and the first thing you know, I had a medal or two here and there, and I just stuck with it. I didn't have any trainers. I didn't have any coaches. I just had a desire to do my best I can. First opportunity I had to go to the national games was in my second year. I drove to San Antonio. They have the National Games Championships every year, every other year, an odd number of years. I went to San Antonio, ran the 100, the 200, and the 400, and that was what you would classify as an also ran. There were 67 people in my age group, and the best I did was 11th place in one of them, but I didn't make the finals of any of them. But I learned where it was going to be 2 years from now, and I set 2 goals for myself. And again, I practice on spreadsheets, and which is available at my website. I'm at it. I have said, okay, when I get to Tucson, I'm going to get one of the top 6 places in the finals of one of these 2 events. I dropped to 400. And also, I'm going to qualify for All-American. They have All-American standards for every age group. It's not a vote for thing. You either make that event to the 100th of a second, or you don't. So when I got to Tucson, I did in fact get a 5th place ribbon, and I made All-American in the 200 meter dash.
What do you say to that individual? Because they're out there, they're potentially listening. But what do you say to that individual that they either say, gosh, I'm too old. They're 34 years old, maybe out of shape, haven't taken care of themselves that well, and they're just finding it difficult to, I'm not even say compete in races that you competed in, because we'll get to that in a little bit more. But what do you say to that individual that says, gosh, you know what? I can't do it because I never was an athlete, and I'm just going to be overweight and out of shape the rest of my life. What do you say to that individual?
I say the same thing Henry Ford said. If you think you can't do it, he's right. If you think you can do it, you're right. It doesn't happen overnight, Matt. You have to start easy, start slow. I started slow just walking. And I was always pretty good at walking because I wasn't competitive. But you want to start out slow, but find something you really enjoy doing. You're not in it to just endure it. If you don't enjoy it, you're not going to stay with it. So if it's physical,
Absolutely.
like athletics, you might want to check with your doctor, make sure he doesn't have any suggestions. Every doctor I've talked to in 30 years I've been running supported me day by day. But you don't have
That's
to.
all.
You don't have to earn over 200 medals. You just want to be your best that you can be.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
if that makes you happy, then you reached your goal. But that goal should be written down and it should be tracked.
There you go. I love it. I love how you track that. And they were tracking it early on. So early on, those first few years you were training, what did your training regimen look like back then?
It was 5 days a week. I first started training in working out on the streets like distance runners, but that didn't work for me because you can't use spikes on the street. And the distance runners it's a different game. That's an endurance game where they have red muscle fiber, which means they get more oxygen to the muscles. I have white muscle fiber, which means I have to replace it by resting in between. So it starts with a mindset, Matt. If you think you're old, you're going to be old. I've never thought of myself as old. When I reached 40, I thought, how am I supposed to feel? I don't. And I'm 91 now. And I've finally, in the last 2 or 3 years, have begun to feel like a 40-year-old ought to feel, or as the world sees it.
Yeah.
I
91
wanted a
years
pacemaker.
young.
Pardon me?
91 years young, right?
Yes. I've had a pacemaker for 4 years, and it wasn't caused by running either. It's caused by a pharmaceutical screw up years before I started running. But anyway, if you want something badly enough, it's worth going after. But you got to have a love for it, and you got to.
So now you've been 30 years sprinting, okay? Have you ever thought or considered what life would have looked like for John Hurd had you not gone to the track? Had you not been inspired to just try running out? What would your life look like had it not been like that? Or is it just something that you don't think about?
I really don't. I really don't. I stopped eating dessert at lunch and dinner every day of my life. I stopped it at lunch. I didn't cut out all the nights, but I would probably just still be sitting around watching television, watching the news, wasting away, if you can say that. I don't know what my heritage is. My father was killed in an accident when he was 40, and my mother was accidentally murdered when she was 61.
Oh my goodness.
But she had been the one to teach me everything in my life that's made me what I am, about believing in yourself. That person over there who dresses an expensive suit doesn't make him better than you are. You are you. He's he. He's just another person.
That's right. You know, what I've said before is, you know, when you start comparing yourself with other people, it's really not fair because that other person hasn't experienced everything that you've experienced. They're unique. And, you know, I shared with you when we connected that, I've been on this cancer journey for the last several years. And, you know, you can look at mortality tables, this and that, whatever you want. And I've said that none of that really matters because those statistics don't include Matt Moran in them. And I'm assuming that you feel the same way about looking at yourself relative to somebody else. It just doesn't matter because you're John Hurd and you have the experiences of John Hurd, not the other person. Does that resonate with you?
It does indeed. I look at the other person and I admire what they have accomplished. but I don't try to compare myself to them and say, oh, gee, I can't do that. That's something, they may be doing something I'm totally inept at, but
Yep.
I that wasn't my life goal to do that.
Yep.
Well, you can't do that. And my mother taught me that. She says, he's no better than you are. You do what you can do, and that's what God would want you to do. There's a purpose for it, all of us.
Well, I'm glad that you went to the God component, because I know you and Sandy are very committed to your faith and, found a very rich spiritual community. Love to hear a little bit about how that spiritual community has helped fueled you find what God's real purpose is what God's purpose is for you, and just overall how spirituality has helped you fuel your sprinting career.
None of it would have worked without that devotion, that dedication, that God's self. Sandy and I have been on a spiritual trip for 42 years since the year we got married. And we have listened to everybody that had what we wanted to hear. And it's made all the difference in the world for us. I don't start the day without my prayers are mostly of thanksgiving. I don't ask for a lot, but I give thanks for all I've got. Now, I don't want to sound like a preacher, but it's true.
You talk about praying of Thanksgiving, a lot of correlations to, we've got a show around gratitude. When I say the word gratitude, and when you think about the word gratitude, what first and foremost comes to mind for both you and Sandy?
Well, I give thanks for being here, for having one more day, for an ongoing, continuous life with my life partner with me, and I give thanks for her in improving health day by day. I name all my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and give thanks for their continuous help, and that's what got my day started.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, do you have any either children? You mentioned you have 3 sons. How many grandchildren do you have?
I'm sorry?
How many grandchildren do you have?
I have 3 grandchildren and 7 great-grandchildren.
Okay. Any sprinters in there?
Yeah, I have a great-grandchild, daughter. And,
Yep.
And I just learned this recently. She is an all-around sprinter, and she does about half a dozen different sports. She plays soccer, she plays basketball, she's a sprinter, and
how old is she? How old is your granddaughter, who's the athlete in the family?
She's in high school.
High school. Okay. Do you get to see her compete at all?
I haven't yet, but I hope to. She lives in Arkansas. I live in Florida.
Well, no, that'd be awesome. I'm sure you'd love seeing her participate, but I'm sure it makes you exceedingly proud that she's following in your athletic spirits. Okay, Jim Mathis. I remember you talking a little bit about Jim Mathis. And he was a sprinter at Memphis State, correct?
Yes.
How did he ultimately play a role in you sprinting? Was it just somebody that you admired at college, and then when the opportunity came up, you thought a little bit about Jim and followed in his footsteps, or how did he inspire you to get into sprinting?
He encouraged me, and we did work out some. One thing about sprinters, you're not part of a group team unless you're in a school, so you do a lot of your training by yourself. But when I was around Jim, he was always encouraging. He gave me some tips on running form and so forth. How do you get faster? He gave me some routines for that, and he was still coaching in high school, and he's not with us anymore. But he was a big, important person in my first beginning to run.
That's awesome. And I think it's important for our listening on is one of the things I talk about is really truly being present to those you're with. It's just really important in life. Because you just never know like who's going to be in front of you, who's going to be able to help you through challenges, who's going to inspire you to do things that you thought you'd never be able to do. And it sounds like Jim was just one of those guys, and I'm so happy that you made that connection that you really probably in the college years probably never realized the impact that he was going to have on your life that really happened some 30, 35 years later.
Yeah, it's amazing, but there's a purpose for everything that happens. That I don't believe in coincidence.
There's no doubt about that. Now, what was the story about the Russian sprinter? I can't really remember that. How did he
just
motivate you?
It was a motivational speaker talking about what persistence and belief in yourself and dedication can do. He had to overcome several physical challenges to become the world's sprint champion in the Olympics. And all I remember was that he was Russian. But it got me thinking about it. And it went 2 weeks after that, so I saw this story in the paper about Jim Mathis. And I said,
too many coincidences there. You had to act on it, right?
Right. I got right on the phone. I started calling around. What do I do? I went to bookstores, old books on running, sprinting. Well, they're full of books on running, but it looked to me like they were all about 5Ks and 10Ks and marathons. And I said, that ain't my style. I finally found an ad in a running magazine. Carl Lewis had a video, a DVD. And for $39.95, I bought that, and I got some good ideas from that too.
So today, when you're training, what's the furthest you'll run? Do you do 400s today, or
No, I gave up the 400. I did make a state championship with it and qualified as All-American with it, but I just run. I started out with 100 and 200, dropped to 400 fairly early. And about 10 years ago, they added 50 meters to the event. So since then, I've been doing 50, 100, and 200.
Hey, John, if they ever add the 25, let me know. I might do that. No, I still tell myself I'm 54, just turned 54. My greatest athletic achievements have not happened yet. My athletic achievement that I'm striving for happens to be on the golf course, but it's not in sprinting. But I love the game of golf, and I keep telling myself my best golf is still ahead of me, and I really sincerely mean that. I think it's true. I believe it's true, and so we're working at that.
I'll believe it for you and with you.
Okay. Well, so what goals do you have today for yourself on the track? Are there any milestones that you're trying to achieve still out there?
And now I'm trying to maintain what my cardiologist said when I had the implant with the pacemaker. Instead of him saying, "No, go to get a soft couch and just relax," he said, "I want to get you back to ground zero, where you were before we had to do this."
Okay. So your times right now are not as good as they were prior to you having the pacemaker put in. Is that correct?
Right. Well, I'm 4 years older for one thing. That's why they have 5-year age brackets.
But you in your head think that you can get back to that speed that you were 4 years ago.
I'll put it this way. And the All-American standards that they have set for my age group.
Yep.
they I exceed all of them every time I
Wow.
go out.
That's awesome.
All of them. I made. I missed the state championships in Florida a couple of years ago because of the pandemic. But I said, "Well, John, I wound up. I have run the state championships in Florida 16 times, and I haven't been beaten in any of the 3 events in those 16 years. And I've made All-American. I've been world class. I made All-American in 25 out of 26 years. That one year I missed it by 1/100th of a second.
Oh my goodness.
That's how serious they are about the game.
Yep.
Yeah, I would like to travel the world and compete with people in other countries, but I gave up flying a long time ago.
There you go. You know, we talked a little bit about, just touched on God's purpose, serving what his plan is for your life. I mean, outside of running, I mean, I know you're kind enough to come on today's show, and I know that your story is going to inspire our listeners to think that for those that think they're not capable of doing something, they're going to think twice because of listening to John Hurd and how you got involved in something that you're really passionate about at the age of 61. I know that's making an impact, but and you mentioned earlier before the show, you've had several conversations like this in the last couple weeks. What is your real goal with respect to sharing your story more publicly today than it was prior to getting on the speaking circuit?
I really believe that if somebody, a 10-year-old or an 80-year-old, hears my story and gets inspired and boosts himself up by his own bootstraps, then I've served part of my purpose. If I sell one book that helps somebody, that's worth all these interviews I'm going through. Now, I'm going to get pleasure out of it, but if I can make it good for somebody else. One reason I like to work out at a high school, or right now I've been training in an elementary school for the last several years, is those little kids come out for their phys ed classes, and they're running around that track and all that stuff, and their coaches tell them, look at that man, he's in his 80s and so forth. And they always speak to him, but the little ones will come by, how old are you? And how do you think I am? And if they answer it right, I know the coach has already told them. But that gives me as big a kick as it does with a bleachers full of people I don't know.
John, I shared with you a little bit about my father. He was a high-level swimmer. He swam at Indiana University, went to the Olympic trials, missed the Olympics by a spot. Today he's 88 years old. Actually, right now, as we speak, he's in a rehabilitation facility because he fell out of bed recently.
Oof.
I only share that with you because I think he's concerned about his health moving forward, and he doesn't train anymore. What words of encouragement might you share with him for somebody that's not too dissimilar in age, but my dad might be questioning, can he still train? Should he still train? And I think he can. He might have to do it differently. But any advice that you might be able to share with my dad, only because he's one of my most avid listeners that I have?
Well, I don't qualify as a coach giving advice, but I'll tell you a little quick anecdotal story that my primary care doctor told me when I was 83. And he said, I had a couple come in here. They were 83 years old. They came in, each of them had a walker. And the best they could do was just walk into his office. And he said, I suggested to them they go down to the fitness center and get on a treadmill and set it for 1 mile an hour and do it 1 minute and do that every day that you can get over there. And then later on, they came back to him in several months, and he said, John, they came in walking upright, and they have upped their speed, and they just feel like a new life. And so all it took was the right encouragement and their willingness to take his advice and do a little on their own, just start with a very easy, I'll put it. But so when somebody's asking me about how do I get started with this one, the first thing I suggest they do is pick out something you will enjoy. You're not there to endure it, something you enjoy because you're going to stick with that. And start out easy. Don't make the mistakes I made when I started out, because I violated every one of them, I think. But start out easy and get your physical checkups if that's what you do once a year, twice a year, whatever. I never saw a doctor every year until I started running.
Oh, wow.
I avoided them all I could.
Well, John, it's such an honor to have you on today's show. I close out each one of my shows with kind of a difficult question. You know, you had a very successful business career in the technology field for many decades. Now you've had 3 decades of wild success on the track. But I have to think that there's been some hurdles along the way that you've had to overcome. And I'm a big believer that through difficult times, generally speaking, create opportunities for you to grow as a human being. And I'd love to hear if there's one hurdle or obstacle that you had to face as a adult or even a child. I mean, you touched on, your father, passing away and early on in your life at the age of 40. Your mother at 61. I mean, those might be some of the hurdles. But is there any one particular hurdle that you faced that you feel helped you grow and have the right mind and the right body to do the things that you're doing today? Love to hear a little bit more about that challenge that you might have faced in life.
Well, the first part of my life, it was being so small. I was unable to do a lot of things that other people could do. And I'd get picked on. That's how I learned to box. I had to defend myself a lot as a kid because I get picked on. But I guess the biggest challenge I've had has to do with this pacemaker, because before I even thought about sprinting, I used to have anxiety attacks. And after so long, I finally gave up and said, all right, I'm going to go see a doctor, because this is just, my life is not like it ought to be. So I did, and he prescribed a beta blocker. Just take a half a pill a day and 3 Annex pills a day. And after 6 days, I discovered that I was taking half of the Xanax and 3 of the beta blockers, because they put the labels on the wrong bottles. And after 6 days, I was a walking zombie.
Oh my goodness.
Shortly after that, I went for my regular checkup with the doctor, and he said, "You've had a heart attack." And I really hadn't,
Wow.
but he sent me to it anyway. Turned out to be the electrical conduction system that sends the message to your heart, it's time to beat, time to beat.
Wow.
And that really didn't affect me physically until several years later. In 2001, I'm warming up for the 200-meter finals in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I'm inside, 95 degrees outside. I'm inside running in place and so forth, and so all of a sudden I just toppled over on the floor. Didn't pass out, but that continued over the years. Every time I put on those spikes, I'm looking over my shoulder. But I kept going. And finally, I had a 4-second heart block, and I was wearing a 30-day monitor, and they called me on the phone immediately, and they said if it had been 5 seconds, there'd be an ambulance at your door already. So that eventually turned into implanting a pacemaker. And,
Wow.
I had to learn to live with that. It's not totally seamless. If you go running a 100-yard dash as fast as you can, that thing might not catch up with you. So what I have to do now is when I go up to the starting line, I'm still running in place, hopping around and everything, just to inform that pacemaker that we're about to use a lot of oxygen in the next few seconds. So it works. It works. And my doctors still encourage me. Okay.
You know, as I hear you just share that story, and thank you for that, just amazes me because, you know, in 21, when this happens, a lot of people would just say, you know what, I've done enough on the track. I've done enough. Yet you keep moving forward, keep trying to better yourself, beat the odds, and it's truly remarkable. And I know our listening audience is going to be inspired to learn from you, hear from you, John. You know, I wish you continued success, not only on the track, but off the track. Wish you and Sandy, you know, all your goals and aspirations for your life and with your children, your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, all come true. Keep believing in yourself and, you know, keep the Lord close, because I know that he's got a lot more planned for you on and off the track. And, you know, our listening audience, be reminded, one of the greatest things I heard John talk about today was, if you think you can't, you're right. And if you think you can, you're also right. So it's all about mindset and having, you know, tracking your goals, as John did early on, as he picked, you know, put on the spikes at age 61. You know, I like to think about 3 things each and every day as I wake up in the morning, and one of which is just be grateful for today. Be grateful that you're able to take a breath. Be grateful that you have food on the table. And it's really important to practice gratitude through the storms that you have in your life. And everybody has ups and downs. It's really through those valleys that gratitude is most important. Secondly, really pay attention to who you're right in front of. And John not been paying attention to Jim Mathis when he was in college, he would not have been inspired to follow in his footsteps at age 61. And lastly, pay attention to how you're feeding your mind, your body, and your soul. Today's guest was John Hurd, the sprinter that's still sprinting at the age of 91 and has won over 160 medals, including ones at the Senior Olympics. So if today's show inspired you in some way, shape, or form, subscribe to today's show, comment on it, and share it with others. With gratitude, Matt listeners, until next time, find the courage to be grateful. Godspeed, my friends.